What happens when Saturn enters Aries, the very first spark of the zodiac? This isn't just a shift in transit. It is the beginning of a 29 years karmic cycle. In this episode, I will guide you through the sacred responsibility Saturn now asks of us, and what this fire means for your rising sign. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Forgotten Sky series. I am your host, Genevieve. The last episode, we talked about Saturn as an archetype and mythology. Today we look in specifically of Saturn enter Aries since 24 May this year. That is the sacred flame of initiation, a new cycle of courageous maturity. Let us take a deep dive of what it actually means. When Saturn enters a new zodiac sign, it does not simply shift themes. It reconstructs the architecture of consciousness. Aries is the very first sign of the zodiac. It represents birth, initiation, the spark of instinct, and raw will. When Saturn, the planet of time, karma, responsibility and form, steps into Aries, we experience the beginning of an entirely new karmic cycle, both collectively and individually. This marks the first time in 29 years that Saturn has entered Aries. What begins now will fully complete until 2054, when Saturn completes its full zodiac wheel. And because Aries begins the chart, this moment signifies a cosmic rebirth of responsibility, a point at which we are asked to begin again, not with restlessness, but with soul-aligned fire. And because Aries is ruled by Mars, the planet of action, courage, conflict, and assertion, Mars rushes forward, often without thinking. It is the divine child, the soldier, the hero. But Saturn, by contrast, is slow, deliberate, and bound to time. He is the elder, the builder, the gatekeeper of consequences. When Saturn enters Aries, Mars must learn discipline, and Saturn must learn to activate from within. So this transit initiates a profound inner conflict between the desire to act and the wisdom to wait. Many of us will feel this as frustration, as a sense of urgency blocked by invisible walls, until we learn how to channel fire with intention. So this placement is asking, can you take bold action without abandoning wisdom? Can you begin again, not from ego or panic, but from truth? Saturn in Aries refines our inner warrior, calling us to maturity in how we fight, how we lead, and how we define courage. This is a new spiritual curriculum of rewriting the warrior archetype. We live in a time when action is often confused with aggression and leadership with domination. But Saturn in Aries offers a different kind of initiation that teaches sovereignty through restraint and power through purpose. In spiritual terms, Aries holds the memory of the first flame, the primal fire that ignites creation. And Saturn asks us to protect that flame, not waste it. This is a cycle that will bring spiritual tests around anger, boundaries, impulse, and assertion. For many, unhealed wounds of masculinity, whether expressed through man, father, patriarchy, or the inner masculine, will resurface. Saturn says it is time to take responsibility for your actions and to repair the karmic damage done by violence, carelessness, or avoidance. Don't you find it so fit into our current international affairs? But he also says you are ready to begin again. With each choice, you build the world anew. The psychological dimension is about the maturity of me, of the I am. The sign Aries corresponds with the phrase I am. When Saturn enters Aries, the question becomes, who are you really, without external validation? This placement brings to the surface all the ways we have constructed identity, from reaction, proving, performing, or fighting for a place in the world. It also reveals our deepest fears of failure, especially when starting something anew. For those with Saturn in Aries natally, or a strong Aries placement, this can stir a lifelong tension between wanting to act freely and fearing the consequences of doing so. There may be early childhood experiences of being punished for asserting yourself, or internalized belief that you must carry others' burden. Saturn now asks you to separate your fire from your trauma, to understand the difference between survival instinct and sacred will. On a global level, this transit will initiate a collective restructuring of our ideas around freedom, individuality, and leadership. Aries governs the self, and Saturn governs accountability. So together they ask, how do we reclaim agency without harming the others? How do we teach our children, our leaders, and ourselves to act not only with boldness, but with care? Expect major discourse around youth leadership, masculinity, military ethics, autonomy, and conscious activism. We may see young leaders rising, military policies reforming, and widespread challenges to impulsive or authoritarian power. The theme is very clear. Freedom must be earned through conscious stewardship. So Saturn here in Aries is not to crush your spark. It is here to purify it. You are being asked to awaken the warrior within, not as a destroyer, but as a protector of soul integrity. This fire, when aligned, becomes the force that births movements, defends the sacred, and creates life-affirming change. But it is not without effort. Saturn will test your will. He will ask, are you acting from fear or from truth? Are you rushing ahead because you are scared to be still? Or are you standing in the courage to begin from alignment? Every step you take during this cycle will either build scaffolding for the future or burn down bridges that can't support your weight. The mantra I have for us: I begin from truth. I lead with presence. I honor the fire that birthed my becoming. But first, let us go back with history and see when Saturn in Aries, what the past reveal about the fire we must now master. Saturn returns to Aries approximately every 20-30 years, staying in the sign for about 2.5 years each time. And when we trace these cycles through modern history, we begin to see a clear pattern. Saturn in Aries birthed new era of leadership, conflict, independency, and identity, but always with a cost, a test, and an invitation to mature how we wield personal and collective power. Let us revisit the past three major transits of Saturn in Aries and observe what each period taught us. Saturn last transit Aries in the mid-1990 from April 96 to June 98. That was the digital dawn and the war of individual voices, and marked by the rise of the internet, global identity politics, and a new generation of youth asserting their voice. The key themes and events: we have the launch of Google in 98 and the mass popularization of personal web pages, marking the birth of the I am era online. Major protest and cultural shift around youth identity, gender, and independence, especially in the post-Cold War generations. Gen Z is born during this time, carrying Saturn in Aries natally, now entering adulthood. As Saturn returned to their chart, they carry the karma of independence, activism, and redefining courage in the digital age. In United States, the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. It occurred shortly after Saturn left Aries, a tragedy tied to youth identity, alienation, and the misuse of anger, echoing the darker side of Aries. And globally, that was the era of pro-democracy uprising in Asia, such as Indonesia in 98, and the social unrest in response to authoritarian government. And the spiritual insight from that period, the era taught us that identity, when not grounded in belonging and soul truth, can become a performance or a weapon. The flame of I am must be nurtured with care, not fed with chaos. And the time before that was from March 1967 to April 1969. That was the era of revolution, rebellion, and the crisis of consciousness. That peak of the countercultural revolution, a period when youth across the Western world rose up to challenge political authority, demand civil rights, and rewrite what freedom means. We can go back to the key event of the Summer of Love in 1967 and the height of the anti-Vietnam War movement. And Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, they were both assassinated during this period in 1968. The global student protest in 68 as well, including Paris, Mexico City, Berlin, and the US, where youth demand change and refused blind obedience to authority. And we have the first successful heart transplant and the Apollo mission, scientific and humanistic breakthroughs born from bold risk-taking. The expression of those periods was the rebellious fire of conscience. It asks, can courage be used to serve peace, not war? Can we build new systems of freedom without replicating old violence? And I think the lesson then was courage must be tethered to wisdom. Fire alone will burn the house down. Only initiated fire can light the way. And another period before that, it was February 1937 to March 1940. The world was at edge. Aggression, collapse, and the cost of empire. This cycle preceded and overlapped with the outbreak of World War II, a time when aggression, nationalism, and unchecked ego power exploded across the globe. And the historical context is the rise of authoritarianism and militarism. Hitler, Mussolini, and the fascist regimes took aggressive control. Japan's invasion of China and the lead up to the Second Sino-Japanese War, and the partitioning of Eastern Europe between Germany and USSR in 1939. Saturn in Aries square Pluto in Cancer during this time. Violence, generation trauma, and karmic reckoning. The spiritual pattern was revealed. What happens when ego seeks domination without reflection, when Mars energy is weaponized instead of matured. And the karmic shadow of that period was unchecked rage, nationalism without ethics, youth manipulated by propaganda, and the misuse of fire in service of destruction. So when we're coming back to present time and future, now Saturn re-enter Aries this year in May, we stand at a turning point of collective identity, just as we did in those prior eras. Like the 90s, we are facing a revolution in digital identity, this time through AI, virtual avatars, and synthetic consciousness. Like the 60s, a new generation is rising, demanding equality, climate justice, and spiritual meaning beyond materialism. Or like the 30s, we are witnessing the shadow rise of authoritarianism, identity polarization, and global instability. But unlike those cycles, we now enter this Saturn transit with Neptune and Chiron already in Aries, bringing spiritual healing, compassion, and divine memory into the fire. This time, the question is, will we choose to fight from fear or lead from soul? So let us now enter the most significant celestial embrace of this Saturn in Aries cycle, the rare and powerful Saturn Neptune conjunction. I have already done an episode on this. I will leave the link below where you can explore it into more details. So Saturn conjunct Neptune is dissolving illusion, building faith, and the sacred union of vision and structure. With both of them in Aries, the meeting will define the entire Saturn in Aries cycle, not only because of its precision at the Aries threshold, but because it marks the confluence of two vastly different archetypes. Saturn is about form, karma, responsibility, structure, and time, while Neptune is dissolution, dream, spirituality, unity, and divine consciousness. Where Saturn builds, Neptune dissolve. Where Saturn limit, Neptune expand. Where Saturn test and Neptune trust. When these two meet, they do not cancel each other. They alchemize. This is a once-in-a-generation aspect that will reshape how we hold faith, how we dream, and how we build spiritual integrity. In mythology and the spiritual meaning, Neptune is the Roman god of the sea, liminal force representing mysticism, illusion, and the eternal longing to return to the divine, while Saturn is Kronos, the devourer of time and father of form, who teaches us through limit and lessons. In Aries, they met at the first flame of the zodiac. This is where the soul declares, I am. But this time, Saturn asks, who are you when stripped of illusion? And Neptune answered, you are what you believe, what you serve, and what you surrender to. Together, they become the spiritual architect, the one who dares to build heaven on earth, not through fantasy, but through sacred effort. This is a time when dreams are tested and illusions are dismantled. This conjunction also exposes the friction between idealism and accountability. Many will feel disillusioned, especially if they have been chasing spiritual goals that are not grounded in reality. You may experience crises of faith as long-held beliefs crumble under the pressure of real-life responsibility. The fear of beginning, paralyzed between the desire to dream and the fear of doing it wrong, and temptation to escape through substances, digital fantasies, spiritual bypass, or denial. And you may also feel exhaustion, spiritual burnout, emotional fatigue, or feeling unmoored from time itself. But Saturn, in conjunction with Neptune, is not here to destroy your dreams. It is here to strip themes of illusion so that only truth remains. So this transit is saying, build only what your soul believes in. Create only what can withstand both time and fire. The mantra I have for you. I release the dream that was never mine. I build the vision seated in my soul. I begin again with faith made real. Let's continue with the next major alignment, the sextile between Saturn in Aries and Uranus in Gemini. Once again, we will explore through the multidimensional lens of myth, psychology, and for a better understanding, I invite you to go back to my podcast of Saturn and Uranus as archetype in my timeless series, The Forgotten Sky. So this sextile is the bridge between old and new, the upgrading the mind and grounding the revolution. This sextile to Uranus in Gemini, a flowing yet charged relationship between tradition and innovation, form and freedom, ground and sky. Saturn is the architect of time, and Uranus is the lightning bolt of awakening. When these two planets are in dialogue, especially through a harmonious sextile, we are given the rare gift of stability amidst change. This aspect does not rip the past apart. Instead, it invites us to evolve with purpose. It asks us not to destroy structure, but to upgrade it intelligently. One system, one thought, one decision at a time. As we know in mythology, Saturn and Uranus, they are father and son, and the history is one of the violent overthrow. But now they meet again, not in conflict. They cooperate rather than compete. This is a karmic opportunity to heal generational conflict between old ways and new voices. It is an aspect that says revolution does not have to destroy in order to create. It can liberate with intelligence and build with courage. With Uranus in Gemini will bring radical shift in AI, communication, language, and education. But Saturn holding steady in Aries, we are asked to build this technology with care, courage, and accountability. This aspect supports the creation of ethical digital systems, the advances in neurological medicine and conscious communication, a return to slow journalism, or youth movement that blend activism with pragmatism. This is the era of philosophical coders, grounded futurists, and spiritual technologists. But the danger with Uranus in Gemini is that we move too fast, intellectually, digitally, even spiritually. With Saturn in Aries, remind us the body is not the enemy of evolution. It is the vessel through which we become real. We are being called to anchor the insight in breath. Let excitement meet embodiment. So this is where download becomes devotion. The visionary becomes the builder. The restlessness becomes the rhythm of revolution, not chaos, but conscious change. The mantra for this sextile: I grant my brilliance, I act with wisdom, I speak with the courage to build a new world. Now let us move forward with one of the most quietly potent aspects, with Saturn sextile Pluto, the deeper current beneath the waves, where power and responsibility meet in silent cooperation. That is the pillar of transformation, of sovereignty, systematic power, and the soul of responsibility. Saturn in Aries, sextile Pluto in Aquarius. This is not a flashy, explosive aspect. Rather, it operates at the root level, reshaping systems, institutions, and inner foundations through quiet revolution and soul-level determination. Saturn is the planet of structure and karma, and Pluto is the force of transformation and power. In sextile, these two work in harmony, helping us build new frameworks for evolution, not through destruction, but conscious restructuring. This is shadow work turned into architecture, and its implications are both collective and deeply personal. Saturn is the gatekeeper of reality, and Pluto rules the underworld. When these two collaborate, we are presented with one of the most potent opportunities for soul mastery, the chance to confront our shadow and build something enduring from the ashes. This is a time when power must be redefined, not as control over others, but as integrity over self. I invite you once again to listen to my previous podcast, especially of Pluto. So as a whole, this aspect asks us to confront where we have given away our power and where we fear the responsibility that comes with reclaiming it. It is not the leader on stage. This is the one who builds temples in silence, who plants seeds of liberation, not for credit, but because it is right. The mantra I have for this transit: I build from shadow into light. I reclaim power through integrity. I serve transformation through quiet devotion. Before we move into the 12th sign, let us now enter the retrograde phase of Saturn in Aries, a pivotal part of this 2025 cycle. It is not a backward movement in truth, but a deep inward turning, where the soul is summoned to reveal how it initiates, acts, and responds to karmic responsibility. When Saturn retrogrades, the inner world's trial, reflecting before you rise. As you can see from the description, the retrograde takes place entirely within the first degree of Aries, the very original point of the zodiac. And if Saturn steps forward into a new landscape, pauses, and then walks back to the threshold to ask, are you truly ready to begin? Are your motives pure? Is your foundation strong? This is the trial of conscious initiation, the moment before the sword is drawn, where one must listen in stillness to the soul's deeper instruction. So when Saturn turns retrograde in Aries, the outer fire is redirected inward. This might show up as temporary loss of momentum, self-doubt around leadership, decision-making, or identity, deep resurfacing of past mistakes, failures, or repressed anger, or the fear of not knowing who you are anymore. But this is not regression, it is refinement. Saturn retrograde asks us to pause, not because we have failed, but because soul evolution requires realignment before action. But mainly because this retrograde happens in Aries, a sign of war, survival, and self-assertion. It brings out old karma tied to rash action, abandonment, violence, or neglect in the soul awareness. Please remember, Saturn retrograde is not punishment, it is preparation. It is the guidance that said, before you light the match, understand the fire. Before you act, remember who you are. You might encounter flashes of past life memories connected to conflict, persecution, or betrayal. Sudden emotional triggers tied to failure, risk, or regret, or deep questioning of whether you will act has served or harmed. And we must look at it in a bigger picture, because this Saturn retrograde occurs within a larger retrograde seasons, and I have already talked about it in previous podcasts of Saturn archetype. So when Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus will also moving backward, this means society itself is in pause, review, and karmic recalibration mode. This collective retrograde vortex will slow institutional change so that root-level reform can occur, bring moral and ethical debate around war, technology, and individual rights, expose false leadership or performative activisms. It may also trigger widespread redefinition of what freedom truly means. All these become the anchor of embodied courage, not the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who listens most deeply before moving forward. The mantra I have for you: I pause with purpose. I return to the flame within. I act only when my soul is ready to lead. Another particular alignment that I want to talk about is with Saturn, Neptune, and Chiron, all three together in Aries. These form the triad of soul mastery, healing the wound, will, and birthing the courage to dream. In Aries, the zodiac of first spark, the realm of selfhood, courage, instinct, and initiation. And with each of them, Chiron brings the wound, the place of soul injury, and the longing to transmute it. Neptune brings the dream, the dissolving of ego, the return to divine longing. And Saturn, he brings the form, the test, the structure, and the wisdom of embodied time. Together, they form a spiritual initiator cycle, a fire triangle of awakening that call us to reclaim the sacred masculine, not in dominance or war, but in responsible action, vulnerability, and presence. Aries energy at its highest is noble, courageous, direct, and initiating. But when wounded, Aries can become impulsive, defensive, and afraid of stillness, addicted to movement, productivity, or control, and violent, emotionally avoidant, or self-abandoning under pressure. In collective history, this shadow of Aries has been projected onto military conquest, patriarchal power, emotional repression, and spiritual bypass through the willpower. The presence of Chiron in Aries since 2018 has begun to reveal the cracks in its outdated model. But now, with Neptune and Saturn joining, we are asked to do more than feel the wound. We are asked to heal it, dream it anew, and build something different. So the healing journey from this year to 2027, this trinity signals a massive shift in the collective healing of masculine energy in man and woman, non-binary bodies, institutions, and societies. We may see the collapse of old masculine templates, especially those based on control, suppression, and hero complexes. The rise of spiritually integrated courage, or a new model of teaching, parenting, and conflict resolution. This is not the warrior of war, but the guidance of the sacred flame. Together, we may offer this prayer. May you lead with soul. May you feel without fear. May you act from truth and rise from love. As we move to the 12th sign, I would suggest you to listen to both Sun, Ascendant, and Moon. These are the three portals of guidance. Which message is yours? With the Ascendant is the accurate placement for transit, while the Sun represents your ego identity, and the Moon is your emotional body, your inner child. You are welcome to listen to all three of them, Ascendant, Sun, and Moon, and reflect on how these different layers speak to one another. You will find thread of single, deeply message repeating through all three portals. If you are Aries rising, the self, body, and identity. This is your Saturn return if you were born between 96 to 98, or the first initiation of soul responsibility if you are encountering Saturn in your rising sign for the first time. Saturn enters your first house like a silent mentor, standing in your mirror and asking, "Who are you truly?" when no one is watching. This transit reshaped your identity, presence, physical body, and sense of self. This is not about becoming someone in the outer world. It is about removing the mask you have worn to survive. You might feel exposed, raw, even invisible at times, but this is where your power is rebuilt from authenticity. When Neptune and Chiron also in your sign, you are healing old wounds of rejection, failure, and performance. This is a time to forgive the self that fought so hard to be seen, and begin anchoring confidence not in achievement, but in inner alignment. It is not easy, but it is holy. You are becoming the soul you were before the world told you to perform. To understand more of Saturn influence in your birth chart, please go back to watch the Saturn Archetype podcast. Or you can book a one-to-one session with me to understand more for a deep dive. Thank you for listening. If you are Taurus rising, for you this is your 12th house, the hidden, the past, and the unconscious. Saturn enters the most mysterious part of your chart, the 12th house, where karma, memory, and spiritual residual lives. This is a retreat cycle, a time when the outer world may quiet, slow down, or becoming confusing. You might feel unseen, emotionally distant, or called inward, not because you are lost, but because your soul is asking to be purified. Saturn here is dissolving old subconscious patterns that no longer serve your evolution. This could include self-sabotage, avoidance of spiritual practice, carrying the guilt of karma of others, or escaping responsibility through overcare or control. With Chiron and Neptune also in this house, deep ancestral and collective wounds may rise from healing, dream, meditations, or synchronicities become your language. Silence becomes your teacher. You are not failing, you are integrating. Let go of what was never yours to carry. For better understanding of Saturn influence, please refer back to the last podcast of Saturn Archetype, or you can book a one-to-one session with me in a deep dive. If you are Gemini rising, this is your 11th house, community, vision, and the future. Saturn moves through your 11th house, the domain of long-term goals, soul alliance, community belonging, and your contribution to the collective field. This is the house of hopes and dreams, but Saturn doesn't grant dreams easily. He tests them first. So in this cycle, you may find that certain visions or social circles begin to fall away or lose resonance. Friendships may feel distant and cooperation may dissolve. If so, don't rush to replace them. Saturn is doing a cleansing of frequency for you, preparing to connect only with those who are truly aligned with your next evolution. This is a sacred refinement of who you serve, what causes you believe in, and what legacy you are building beyond your personal gain. With Chiron and Neptune also transiting this house, your idealism is being recalibrated. You may confront disillusionment with spiritual or activist communities, or feel unsure where you belong. Let yourself grieve the loss of imagined future that no longer fit, but also allow the real vision to come forward. This is a time to lay foundations for the next 10 to 20 years of your life. What kind of world do you want to live in? Saturn asks you to stop fantasizing about it and start becoming the one who helps building it. Not all dreams are real, but the ones that are worth living required devotion. Please go back to listen to the last podcast of Saturn Archetype, or you can book a one-to-one session with me for a deep dive of Saturn influence. If you are Cancer rising, this is about your career, calling, and public identity. Saturn enters the most visible part of your chart, the 10th house, the house of career, reputation, and your legacy in the world. This is where your soul's public expression is being tested, refined, and matured. Expect pressure in the outer world, increased responsibility, expectations, or a sense that something must now become real. If you have been hiding from your purpose, Saturn will make that unbearable. If you have been chasing roles or statues out of fear or survival, Saturn may strip those titles away to bring you home to what truly matters. This transit reshaped how you define success. The 10th house is not just about statues, it is about spiritual authority. Saturn here asks, what do you stand for? What do people turn to you for? And what are you here to build that will outlive your name? With Neptune and Chiron also transiting this house, your relationship to responsibility, service, and ambition is being healed. Past life karma around misuse of power, abandonment of calling, or being persecuted for your gift may arise. You are being shown how to hold power without losing your soul. You may experience a major change in career path, a sudden calling into leadership or mentorship, emotional exhaustion from being seen, and the need to learn new boundaries, or a death and rebirth of your public voice. Your vocation is not what you do, it is what you dedicate yourself to, even when no one is watching. Please watch my previous podcast of Saturn Archetype to understand more. Or you can book a one-to-one session with me for a deep dive of Saturn influence in your natal and transit chart. If you are Leo rising, here we are talking about the beliefs, expansion, and higher purpose. Saturn now transits your 9th house, the domain of higher education, philosophy, long-distance travel, publishing, and the spiritual worldview that shapes your life. This transit begins a soul-level audit of your beliefs, not the ones you repeat, but the ones you live by. Saturn here reveals where your faith has been borrowed, bypassed, or based on inherited truth rather than direct experience. It is a time when spiritual systems, teachers, or ideologies you once clung to may fall away, not out of betrayal, but because you have outgrown them. You are being asked, what do you really believe in? Do your worldview support your evolution or keep you safe? Where are you still living through someone else's truth? This can be a powerful period for publishing, teaching, or beginning formal spiritual study, but only if it is born from genuine conviction, not from needing to prove anything. Saturn is interested in embodied wisdom, not performance. With Neptune and Chiron also transiting this house, this is a time of profound spiritual vulnerability and visioning. You may feel lost for a while, disconnected from meaning, or unsure what's next. But that is part of the spiritual restructuring. You are being stripped of false maps so that you can walk the pilgrim path with your own feet. You're not here to worship a path. You are here to walk it. I suggest you to watch the previous podcast of Saturn archetype for better understanding, or you can book a one-to-one session with me to make a deep dive of Saturn influence in your life. If you are Virgo rising, this is your 8th house of power, intimacy, and soul contracts. With Saturn now in your 8th house, you are entering one of the most transformative and psychologically intense chapters of your Saturn cycle. This is not surface level work. This is depth healing, where the soul descends into the underworld of trust, trauma, and power. The 8th house rules emotional and financial entanglement, shared resources, inheritance and debt, sexual energy and intimacy, death and rebirth and transformation, energetic exchange in soul contract. So Saturn here asks, what have you merged with that no longer supports your sovereignty? You may experience endings in relationships that were built on codependency or unspoken expectation, a tightening of finance or emotional support that's forced you to reclaim inner resources. The return of karmic debt, emotional, energetic, or financial. Confrontation with fear, abandonment, betrayal, or grief. This transit can feel like a long walk through shadows, but it is also a time of sacred alchemy. With Chiron and Neptune also in this house, you are healing deep wounds around vulnerability, energetic boundaries, and the fear of being fully seen and shared. The 8th house Saturn cycle is a soul contract in itself. You are not being punished. You are being initiated into trust, into spiritual intimacy, and into a power that is not taken from others, but sourced from your own integration. Not everything that dies is a loss. Some things end to return you to yourself. I invite you to watch the last podcast about Saturn archetype, or you can book a one-to-one session with me for a deep dive of Saturn meaning in your natal chart and transit. Thank you. If you are Libra rising, this is your 7th house of relationships, agreement, and sacred mirrors. Saturn now moves into your 7th house, initiating a profound karmic cycle through the realms of partnerships, contract, and relational dynamics. This is the house of the other, romantic partners, business collaborations, close friendships, and even adversaries. Saturn's transit here is rarely subtle. You will feel the weight of your agreements, both spoken and unspoken. You may feel tested in marriage or committed relationships, or find yourself drawn into dynamics that reveal where your boundaries, expectations, or self-worth need strengthening. Saturn's questions here are very clear. Do you know the difference between love and obligation? Are you choosing partnership from fear of loneliness or from soul resonance? Can you remain whole while standing heart to heart with others? With Neptune and Chiron also transiting your seventh house, illusions around relationships may dissolve, including romantic fantasies, savior projections, and unhealthy dependency patterns. You may feel waves of grief as you see someone or yourself clearly for the first time. But this clarity is a gift. It allows you to build new relationships on truth, not illusion. This is also a powerful cycle for spiritual partnership, where unions formed now may carry a sense of divine timing, surface or karma. You may meet someone who challenges you to grow, not through ease, but through depths. You are learning not only how to love, but how to build love that lasts. And I invite you to watch my last podcast of Saturn Archetypes, or you can book a one-to-one session with me for a deep dive of Saturn influence in your natal and transit chart. If you are Scorpio rising, this is your sixth house of health, daily work, and sacred discipline. Saturn now enters your sixth house, the realm of ritual, responsibility, healing, and service. This is the house that governs the day-to-day system that supports your life, including your work routine, health habits, energetic hygiene, and relationship to duty. Saturn's presence here can feel like a tightening, a call to become more intentional with your time, body, and boundaries. If you have been scattered, overgiving, or neglecting your health, Saturn will make these patterns unsustainable. You may experience physical symptoms or emotional exhaustion not as punishment, but as a sacred signal calling you back into the right alignment with your body and your work. This transit asks if your work in service to your soul or just your survival. What rituals truly nourish your nervous system? Where have you sacrificed yourself to please others? And what would it mean to say no? With Chiron and Neptune also transiting this house, your old stories around perfectionism, service as worthiness, or healing as control are being dissolved. You may uncover core wounds around being useful, productivity, or the guilt of rest. Saturn now teaches you the difference between sacrifice or sacred structure. This is a powerful time to create long-term health practices. Set boundaries in your work environment. Recommit to your spiritual or creative discipline. Redefine what success means in the rhythm of your daily life. What you do every day becomes who you are. Saturn is asking you to become devoted to the soul in the small things. I invite you to watch my last podcast of Saturn Archetypes, or you can book a one-to-one session with me for a deep dive of Saturn influence in your natal and transit chart. Thank you. If you are Sagittarius rising, This is your fifth house of creativity, joy, and inner child reclamation. Saturn now move into your fifth house, activating themes around self-expression, creativity, children, joy, romance, and personal passion. This may sound light and playful, but Saturn works here is anything but casual. The fifth house is where you shine, where your inner child plays, where your soul creates, and where your heart says, "This is mine to share with the world." When Saturn entered this realm, it initiates a soul audit of joy. Are you expressing from love or from fear? Are your gifts truly yours, or are they performance for approval? You may feel a creative block or crisis of confidence, emotional distance in romantic or sexual relationships, the weight of responsibility around parenting or artistic legacy, a deep longing for real joy, but without knowing how to reach it. With Neptune and Chiron also transiting this house, your heart is tender. Old wounds may surface around being unseen, unheard, or unappreciated. Childhood memories of suppression, comparison, or being told you were too much may return. Saturn invites you not to run from this pain, but to hold space for it and rebuild authentic self-expression from the inside out. This is a powerful time to commit to a creative path, even if it is slow or humble. To take responsibility for your pleasure rather than waiting for someone else to bring it. Reparent your inner child with daily acts of compassion. Heal the belief that joy must be earned. Joy is not a reward, it is a responsibility. You are here to live the soul's delight with devotion. I invite you to watch my last podcast on Saturn archetype, or you can book a one-to-one sessions with me for a deep dive of Saturn influence in your natal and transit chart. Thank you. If you have Capricorn rising, this is your fourth house of roots, family, and inner foundation. Saturn now enter your fourth house, the base of the chart, your ancestral roots, emotional foundation, and the place that represents home in its truest form. This transit often signals a karmic reckoning with family dynamic, childhood memory, and the story you tell yourself about where you come from. Saturn here is not interested in surface harmony. He goes deep and he asks, what have you inherited and what are you ready to rewrite? You may experience major transitions in home life, such as moving, renovations, or shifts in your living situations. Responsibilities related to parents, elders, or family lineage. Emotional withdrawal, as you realize part of your past must be grieved or restructured. Could be a call to redefine what safety truly means, not as control, but as conscious belonging. With Neptune and Chiron also transiting this house, the wounds of your inner child are deeply activated, particularly those related to feeling unseen, unsupported, or misunderstood by your family of origin. You may find yourself longing for a home you have never had, or dreaming into one that's waiting to be created. Saturn's lessons is you are no longer a child, you are now the elder in the making. You do not have to repeat the past, but you must honor it to be free from it. Your sacred duty is not just to heal your own root, but to become a stable root for others. The home you have always sought begins in your own spine. Build it from truth. I invite you to watch the last podcast on Saturn archetype, or you can book a one-to-one session with me for a deep dive of Saturn influence in your natal and transit chart. Thank you. If you are Aquarius rising, that is the third house of communication, mindset, and the voice of truth. Saturn now transits your third house, the realm of communication, learning, sibling, technology, and daily thought patterns. This may sound mundane, but it is one of the most profound karmic rewiring of your inner operation system. This is the house that governs how you think, speak, and listen, not just to others, but to yourself. With Saturn here, you are invited to slow down and observe the mental structures you have inherited. Are your thoughts rooted in trust or in defense? Are your words bridges or barriers? You may feel silenced or misunderstood in conversations, frustrated with social media, or overwhelmed by information. Or I desire to stop speaking unless it feels deeply aligned. Call to write, to teach, or speak, but with greater responsibility. This transit often brings serious communication projects, such as writing a book, launching a course, or learning challenges that leads to breakthrough. Saturn in the third house is your invitation to become a voice of integrity, not flashy, but precise. With Neptune and Chiron also transiting this house, you are healing from past wounds around being ignored, mocked, dismissed, or misrepresented. You are learning to claim your voice without aggression and to let silence be a sacred ally when needed. This is also a karmic reset with sibling or extended family, where old dynamics may surface and ask to be matured. Thought is not just noise, it is magic. Every word you choose is a spell. Saturn is teaching you how to cast them wisely. If you are Pisces rising, the house of self-worth, resources, and soul-earned value, Saturn now moves through your second house, the realm of money, material stability, self-worth, earned income, and the value you place on yourself and your work. This is where spiritual embodiment meets material responsibility. Saturn's presence here asks, what are you building that is truly yours? And do you believe you are worthy of receiving it? This is not just a financial transit. It is a deep soul initiation into value and embodiment. You may experience financial slowdowns, restructuring, or new responsibilities. A sober look at spending patterns, energetic output, and compensation. You may have doubt around self-worth or imposter syndrome, or a powerful desire to stabilize your life, not through fantasy, but through grounded steps. With Neptune and Chiron also in this house, you are healing from karmic patterns of poverty, sacrifice, or avoidance. You may have long carried the belief that being spiritual means being selfless, or that your gifts are too tangible to be compensated. Saturn say otherwise. This is a time to get real about your financial foundations, building sustainable structure to support your purpose, to treat your time and energy as sacred currency, or to detach your self-worth from performance or productivity. You are not meant to just float through life. You are here to root your soul into form and to know that it is valuable. I invite you to watch my last podcast of Saturn as archetype, or you can book a one-to-one session with me to have a deep dive of Saturn's significance in your natal and transit chart. Thank you.